The age of endless impunity is over. For decades, drug cartels operated from safe havens. Believing their strongholds were untouchable, they hid behind borders and corrupt governments, funneling deadly fentanyl and cocaine onto American streets. Past efforts tried to stop them with warrants and slow diplomacy. Those efforts failed to break the threat. Now, everything has changed. The United States has stopped chasing and started dismantling. American forces have been ordered to destroy foreign drug cartel bases with direct, overwhelming military power. This is not a metaphor. This is war in the literal sense. The radical transformation of U.S. policy began quietly in August 2025. President Donald Trump signed a classified directive. That directive broke a long-standing rule. It gave the Pentagon the power to use military force against Latin American drug cartels. The administration officially called these cartels foreign terrorist organizations. This single legal step erased the decades-old line between law enforcement and actual warfare. It gave the military clear authority to conduct lethal operations on foreign soil and in international waters. The goal was no longer to disrupt their shipments or capture a few leaders. The instruction was simple and final. Dismantle, not disrupt. The military must neutralize cartel infrastructure using precision strikes, special operations raids, and maritime blockades. This was a decisive shift, replacing old reactive enforcement with preemptive warfare. The message was sent directly from the Pentagon: annihilate cartel sanctuaries using overwhelming force. Venezuela became the first and clearest target for this new doctrine. For too long, its coastline had been the launch pad for massive cocaine shipments. These launches were protected by corrupt officials and armed gangs. U.S. intelligence identified these fortified coastal enclaves as strategic hubs. They were the key link from South American drug producers to the main Caribbean smuggling routes. When American aircraft struck those hubs, the world saw the power of this new commitment. Explosions ripped through makeshift ports. These ports had once been immune to any real punishment. Now, the United States was treating cartel strongholds just like enemy bases, subject to wartime rules. The operation itself was a clear demonstration of American dominance.
Before we get to that, I need your help. I'm trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I need your help. So I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe and help me out.
The ongoing military campaign quickly turned the Southern Caribbean into a high-tension zone. The U.S. deployed a powerful task force. This force included warships, amphibious assault vessels, F-35 fighter jets, and reconnaissance drones. These assets were stationed in Puerto Rico and surrounding waters, forming a tight net around Venezuela's northern coast. The surveillance focus shifted completely, from simply watching to actively targeting. When Venezuelan narcotics boats appeared off the coast, they were not merely inspected, they were destroyed. The strike on September 2, 2025, serves as the defining moment of this new phase. The target was a vessel identified by U.S. intelligence. It was being operated by cartel affiliates from Venezuela's Sucre state. This group was allegedly tied to the brutal Tren de Aragua network. Intelligence showed the boat was carrying large shipments of cocaine meant for the U.S. mainland. A U.S. Navy aircraft operating from the Caribbean delivered the lethal blow. Precision-guided munitions hit the target. The immediate result was the complete destruction of the boat. Several crew members, suspected traffickers, were eliminated. The U.S. Southern Command later released the video footage. It showed the missile impact, the resulting explosion, and the quick sinking of the vessel. This was not a covert action. It was a visible, overt act of state-authorized warfare. Washington framed the operation as both defensive and preventive. The message was unmistakable. The era of indictments was over. The era of obliteration had begun. This projection of force signaled that the U.S. would now use fighter jets and naval assets against cartel networks anywhere they posed a threat. The immediate consequences of this decisive action were devastating for the cartels. Key drug trafficking routes connecting Venezuela's coast to Caribbean transshipment hubs were systematically dismantled. Before the campaign, intelligence estimated that between 350 and 500 tons of cocaine moved through this corridor annually. Now, that figure has been dramatically cut. What was once the primary maritime artery for cocaine leaving South America is now shut down completely. This is operational shock for the cartels. The loss of maritime access forced the traffickers into a painful retreat. They were pushed toward land-based smuggling routes through Colombia and Brazil. These alternate routes are far riskier and much more costly. The expense of fuel, bribes, and logistics has increased exponentially. This instantly undermined their profit margins. For groups like Tren de Aragua, whose entire power structure relies on controlling coastal routes, the strikes were an existential threat. This economic pressure served as an intermittent reward for the coalition. The loss of cartel cash weakens their ability to pay off corrupt Venezuelan military and police officials. This, in turn, erodes a critical pillar of support for the Maduro regime itself. The cartels and their state allies are being choked by American military pressure. On the ground, the results are clear. Several key ports once used by traffickers, including Guaira, San Juan de Unare, and Carupano, are now under constant drone surveillance. Defense analysts released satellite imagery that showed a marked decrease in maritime activity along those coasts. Interdictions and seizures have increased dramatically. U.S. forces reported claiming record cocaine interceptions in the first month alone. The sheer scale of destroyed boats and eliminated suspected traffickers underscores the power of this new campaign. The cartel's reaction was predictable chaos, exposing their inherent weakness. The moment a stronghold is destroyed, the command structure shatters. The loss of leadership isolates regional cells. This breaks the essential chains of communication for logistics, finance, and enforcement. In this confusion, mid-level operators are forced to make independent moves. They make desperate mistakes that reveal their presence to American intelligence. Law enforcement can suddenly see what was hidden. Vehicles reroute without coordination, intermediaries make unsecured calls, and money couriers are trapped without orders. For a short time, the natural secrecy that protected the network clears completely. This temporary exposure allows authorities to strike secondary nodes and cripple supply chains that relied on the fallen hub. The humiliation extends to their financial operations. The seizure of cartel assets freezes the liquidity they need to operate. This interrupts payrolls, freezes bribery channels, and stops logistical funding. The economic blow reverberates through the allied networks that depended on the main organization's money. Without reliable cash flow, bribed officials hesitate to act. Suppliers demand money up front. Enforcers begin to reconsider their loyalty to a losing side. This chaos is the ultimate sign of their deep weakness. Adversaries who once controlled the rhythm of the conflict are now forced to react to it.
Before we get to that, I need your help. I'm trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I need your help. So I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe and help me out.
They are scrambling into defense, evasion, and silence. However, the cartels do attempt to adapt. This attempts to show their resilience, but it only highlights their desperate state. Hidden reserves and alternative funding sources emerge. Criminal accountants activate contingency plans, shifting operations to informal markets and cryptocurrencies. The destruction of the central hub forces affiliated cells to operate independently. This independence can lead to evolution. What was once a single, large entity now becomes a constellation of fragments, much harder to track and eliminate. The network transforms, shedding its visible, institutional form and reassembling in smaller, more flexible forms. Adaptation begins with paranoia. The shock of a public strike drives extreme fear. Cartels abandon electronic communication. They switch to using human couriers, coded messages, and physical signals. Encrypted apps give way to slower, analog systems, notes, passwords, and symbols. The result is reduced traceability, but slower coordination. Surveillance agencies are forced to chase ghosts. The digital silence is a deliberate act to deny investigators the data they rely on. This forced regression to old methods is a sign of their desperate retreat. Their physical locations also shift. Surviving members retreat to isolated terrain. They hide in mountains, dense forests, and remote borderlands. These areas become new, micro-fortresses, harder to reach and easier to defend. What was a single massive stronghold transforms into dozens of tiny, dispersed shelters. Small labs and mobile workshops replace large complexes. By decentralizing, the cartel ensures that no single strike can repeat the devastation of the original. This tactical dispersion increases their survivability, but it deepens the challenge for their own command and control. The internal dynamics of violence also change in a moment of near miss. With command broken, rival factions within the same network start to fight each other. Disputes over leadership, revenue, and routes quickly turn into local wars. This destabilizes entire communities. Law enforcement sees visible violence, which can be interpreted as decay. But in the background, alliances are simply realigning. As some factions collapse, others quickly absorb them. The overall criminal capacity does not vanish, it only redistributes. The strikes carry profound psychological weight, achieving the ultimate humiliation. For decades, Venezuela's coastal territories were viewed as untouchable sanctuaries. They were zones where international law rarely reached. The sudden decisive intrusion of US power has shattered that illusion forever. Local populations who were long accustomed to cartel dominance now live under the constant threat of potential airstrikes. Fear and deep uncertainty have spread across fishing communities. Residents report avoiding the sea after dark. The very concept of safety has been redefined for those who once believed themselves beyond consequence. This transformation resonates far beyond Venezuela's coast. It signals to every organized group built on fear that the age of invisible protection is definitively ending. The destruction of sanctuaries is not merely about taking territory. It is about rewriting the mental map of power. When no hiding place feels safe, every decision a cartel leader makes becomes hesitant. Every movement is calculated under unbearable pressure. This constant tension corrodes leadership from within. Paranoia replaces pride, and disunity replaces discipline. The sanctuary that was once a refuge has become a trap. The US operations are a clear warning shot, not just to Venezuela, but to any state perceived as harboring transnational criminal groups. The administration uses this campaign to connect directly with domestic concerns. It is portrayed as a necessary extension of the fight to combat the fentanyl crisis and protect American families. The message from President Trump was direct. Every boat sunk means fewer drugs killing our citizens. This narrative aligns the American identity with competence, order, and decisive action. This strategic posture is maintained despite international political noise. The government in Caracas has strongly condemned the strikes. Venezuelan officials claim those killed were mere civilians or fishermen, not cartel members. They describe the attacks as extrajudicial murder and a flagrant violation of international law. President Maduro has declared a state of emergency in coastal regions and mobilized the Venezuelan Navy. He publicly stated that this is not a war on drugs, but a war against Venezuela. Russia and China, strategic partners of Venezuela, have expressed full support for Caracas. Moscow even warned that continued US operations could destabilize the entire region. However, the US maintains its legal footing by using the concept of self-defense against non-state actors engaged in ongoing hostile activity. The legal maneuver, framing the operations as part of a non-international armed conflict, allows the US military to apply the laws of war to targets outside traditional battlefields. This tolerates legal ambiguity as long as the political objective, which is deterrence through dominance, is achieved. Meanwhile, on the ground, the internal power dynamics within Venezuela are shifting profoundly. The reduced income from drug trafficking is hitting key factions within the armed forces and police. They are facing severe funding shortages. This immediate loss of cartel cash weakens the regime's internal cohesion. It increases the risk of defections and localized power struggles. The financial arteries that sustain the Maduro government's entire patronage system are constricting. This makes the regime's political control more brittle. This massive military escalation sets a powerful, definitive precedent. The combination of legal redefinition, explicit military authorization, and direct foreign strikes distinguishes this from every prior campaign. It is the first time U.S. forces have been empowered to dismantle a cartel base abroad with direct, sanctioned military precision. The scale and the mandate place it outside all previous precedents, from Panama to Caribbean interdictions. By dissolving the border between a criminal and a combatant, the U.S. has entered uncharted territory. The implications extend far beyond Venezuela, setting a precedent for future interventions under the banner of counterterrorism or counter-narcotics. The myth of the invincible cartel sanctuary has been their greatest weapon. Its public destruction is not just a military success, it is a cultural turning point. It reminds the world that no power, however entrenched, is safe from consequence. It marks the return of accountability in a space that has rejected it for decades. The sanctuaries fall, and with them falls the illusion that they could ever stand forever. The ultimate outcome of this strategy depends on endurance. If Washington maintains this powerful, sustained pressure, the cartel networks could fragment entirely. The financial backbone of Venezuela's illicit economy could collapse. If momentum is allowed to fade, the traffickers will simply return, emboldened by their survival. Between these two outcomes lies a volatile region where legality, legitimacy, and force collide. For now, the symbolism is crystal clear. Safe havens are no longer safe. The Caribbean, once a shadow corridor of illicit trade, is now a militarized frontier of American enforcement. The message is not just heard, it is seen, broadcast, and remembered. The destruction of cartel sanctuaries is the unraveling of an entire belief system. The myth of invincibility has died publicly, and that death changes everything that follows. The essence of this moment is simple: visibility replacing secrecy, action replacing intimidation, and consequence replacing impunity. The United States no longer intends to fight cartels with warrants. It intends to fight them with warships. The era of impunity in the Caribbean narco route has begun to crack. This strategic shift shows the world the true meaning of dominance and control. This takedown was just the start. The fight isn't finished. On your screen is the next video. Click the video, it opens right away, and you'll see the cartels crushed even harder.